Well, Pastor Paul had been advised by his doctor that he needed to lose 30 pounds or risk serious health consequences. So the good pastor took his new diet very seriously, even changing his driving route to the church building to avoid his favorite bakery. One morning, however, he arrived for Bible study carrying a gigantic devil's food cake. And the class chuckled and chided him, but the good pastor's smile remained like a cherub. This is a very special cake, he explained. I accidentally drove by the bakery this morning, and there in the window were a host of goodies. I felt this was no accident, so I prayed, Lord, if you want me to have one of those delicious cakes, let me have a parking place directly in front of the bakery. And sure enough, he continued, the 8th time around the block, there it was. For those of you that are here for the first time, I'm encouraged to tell a joke every week, and sometimes it lands like a sack of bricks, like this one, so thank you. Okay. So this morning, I've just been getting that I wanted to bring a Bible message with some metaphysics. You ready? You want to do some metaphysics? Okay, good. So there's energy around healing, healing in our world right now. And so this is one of my favorite Bible stories from Jesus. And it comes from the 5th chapter of John. So I'm going to share that with you, and then we're going to dive in. Okay. So after there was a festival of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now in Jerusalem by the sheep gate, there's a pool called Bethsaida, which has 5 porticos. In these lay the blind, lame, and paralyzed. One man was there who had been ill for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had been there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be made well?" And the sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no one to put me in the pool when the water's stirred up. And while I'm making my way, someone else steps down ahead of me." Jesus said to him, "Stand up, take your mat, and walk." At once the man was made well, and he took up his mat and began to walk. Later, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, "See, you have been made well. Do not sin anymore, so that nothing worse happens to you." Okay, familiar with that story? I see some shaking heads. Okay. All right, so let's just dive in to what this can mean to us. And just so you know, when I say it's metaphysics, yes, there's a metaphysical Bible dictionary, in Unity. And there's also just my own discernment. So I want you to know there's a blend of both. So the first thing Jesus asked the man is, "Do you want to be made well?" Because he knew he could do this healing thing, but if this person didn't want to be well, he wouldn't be. So Jesus, metaphysically, in a story, always represents our I am nature. And so in this story, Jesus represents our inherent wholeness that's always present. It's the fullness that's with us all the time. So he had to ask, because he knew this same nature was in this man, are you really wanting to be made well? And notice when he asked him that, the man went into a story. "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, and while I'm making my way, someone else gets down ahead of me." Wah, wah, wah. So how many of us can relate to this, that when we're looking at something we want to heal or something we want to create in our life, that if someone will come up to us and say, "How's it going?" we have a story about it. It's not that we're wrong, folks. It's just that we have a story about it. Why something isn't happening. And our story, unfortunately, becomes our truth instead of what's really true. And did you notice I love this. Jesus was such a master teacher. He did not engage. He heard the want, 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 and he just said, stand up, take your mat, and walk. No judgment, no dilly-dally, matter-of-factly, just do it. So, okay, let's go back and do some more metaphysics. So, the pool. The pool had 5 porticos. Well, first of all, the pool represents the consciousness, the place in consciousness where we can be cleansed by the divine life that is us. Okay? And the 5 porticos represent our 5 senses. And the mat represents the consciousness, the man that had created. You know, we make our bed and lie in it. Yeah. So Jesus saw and knew what this man could do beyond his circumstances, but this man was caught in his 5 senses. You know what I mean by that? It's like, so remember last week we talked about the unity principles, and the first one is there's one power. And when we are giving the external world power, we're creating 2 powers. Folks, there's one power. And when we let our senses, what we can hear and taste and see and smell and all that, be what we think is true, we're giving power to the external world. And so this man represents, here he is, he can allow himself to dive into the pool of divine life, of his inherent wholeness. But he's stuck in his story. He's stuck in his senses. He believes what's really happening to him. And there were blind, lame, and paralyzed folks around him. How often can we be blind to a new possibility? How often can we be crippled by a victim consciousness? How often can we be paralyzed by fear? Remember? False evidence appearing real? Forgetting everything is all right? Yeah. Can anybody else relate? Yeah. Okay, so the pool was in Jerusalem, and Jerusalem means peace, that place of peace. And the sheep's gate, sheep is innocence. Sheep is innocence. And I was reminded about what Jesus said about, you must become like a little child in order to enter the kingdom of heaven. We must become in that childlike, innocent, open possibility way of being to experience the kingdom of heaven, which is our healing. The kingdom of heaven, folks, is just a consciousness of knowing, a consciousness of really feeling and knowing our oneness. And this week, it was my goddaughter's 3rd birthday. She was 3 years old this week. And we went and ate sushi. Now, she does not eat raw sushi, okay, but she does like the other stuff. And I'm always so moved by her because she never walks around saying, oh, we got to go to another party. Wow, I got to hang out with my Aunt Sheryl that kisses me all the time. She's always in joyful expectancy. She expects life to be joyful. She expects to have fun. That's what I think Jesus is calling us. So in order to experience our healing, folks, in order for us to experience a new possibility, we got to be open. We got to be in that expectancy of our good, because our good is always present. Okay, are we following? Are you with me? Okay. All right. And so if we're not at peace, and if we're stuck in our 5 senses with all those grown-up thoughts that we have, trying to figure it out all the time, when we try to figure it out, okay, so in order to have my healing, in order to have a new possibility, I'm going to make my A list, and then I'm going to make my B list, my pros and cons, and I'm going to figure it out. How's that working for us? I'm not saying that that's not sometimes a valuable piece, but ultimately, when we reflect on having a transformational or transformative moment in our lives, it's when we surrender. It's when we open our hearts and we say, you know what? I've been trying it this way. I've been pushing the river this way. I've been in my story and I've been in my senses. And now I'm just going to let go. I'm going to let go and I'm going to flow. And I'm going to keep holding my knowing. Because the thing is, folks, I love what Jesus said about, see, you've been made well. Don't sin anymore because something worse might happen to you. Have you ever had a breakthrough in something, and then it gets scary, and you try to go back to where you were? Isn't it really icky? It's kind of like, when the rubber band expands, you cannot make it go back to its original size. But boy, we can try. We can try to fit that square peg in a round hole, and it is painful. You know what I'm talking about? So that's what Jesus was saying. Jesus is like, okay, so you take up your mat and you walk and and you claim your healing and your wholeness, but you got to keep doing your work. Because folks, as we know, especially right now, man, is the world compelling. And can it shift us off our knowing, right? And so what Jesus is telling this guy is that keep in your knowing. Do your work. Stay prayed up. And if you've taken the 4T Prosperity Program, there's such a great story from that I want to share with you that I think is worth us recalling, and if you haven't heard it. This is from Stretton's experience. He was living in Maui, and it was before he was a Unity minister. And each week he held a prayer circle at this little church in Waikapu where everyone was invited to come and pray and have others hold within the desires of their heart. And so this particular week, he noticed his energy was pretty low. And he wasn't really feeling like his ultimate prayer mojo was kicking in. So when it was time for the prayer circle to start and no one was there, he didn't really mind too much. He just went ahead and started his own prayer and was getting ready to leave when a woman he didn't recognize walked in the door. And she said her name was M, and she wanted to pray. And she looked down and distraught. And so they started to pray. And all of a sudden, Stretton's prayer mojo just kicked in. And he said, wow, I don't remember praying that powerfully and in my knowing in a long time. So she wanted help because she hadn't felt well for a long time. So Stretton's prayed right from his heart with her seeing health and wellness. She wanted the right male companionship. And he again went to his heart and held that knowing with her. She wanted to be guided to sell a condominium she had just listed, and he again responded from his heart with full knowing that she was guided and prosperous. And M left after he finished praying. And when she came to his church 10 days later, he hardly recognized her. She sparkled. She had this big, radiant smile on her face, and she was filled with joy and was expressing it as her light and presence. And she said to Stretton, "What power you have! I have never felt better than I've felt in years. And not only that, a long-lost love, a man from my past, arrived from the mainland within 48 hours after we prayed. He intends to live on Maui, and we have resumed our relationship. I haven't sold the condo unit yet, but better than that, I've listed the entire building for a multi-million-dollar sale, and I have a potential buyer. You are powerful." And Stretton tried to tell her it was not him that did the work. It was her changing her thoughts and feelings in alignment with the truth of who she is, that she had taken up her mat and walked. A year later, he ran into M. She looked even worse than she did when he first prayed with her. She said, "I don't feel well again. My guy went back to the mainland and my condo deal fell through." And Stretton offered some encouraging words, but then couldn't help but wonder, why hadn't she come back to pray? It had been a whole year since she had come to pray. Why? See, this is what Jesus meant when he told the man, take up your mat. But beware. Don't sin anymore because it could get worse. It's just don't miss the mark. Folks, we are just being called right now to keep holding our knowing. And so I think the message today is we're all capable of whatever it is that we would like to let go of, that we would like to claim, to take up our mat and walk. We are all inherently whole. We all have the ability to heal. And remember, healing shows up in a lot of different ways. Healing doesn't always mean cure. We can heal in many ways. So the opportunity that we have this week, I just invite you to just look within and see, where would you like to take up your mat and walk? Where would you like to have a new possibility show up in your life? And what can you hold in constant prayer? Because prayer is an affirmation of what is true. Okay, you with me? You ready to take up our mat? Yeah. We're grateful for the wisdom of Jesus that we can share this morning, grounded in some metaphysics. So let's affirm together. I stand in faith and walk in my knowing. I am healed, whole, and free. And so it is.